So this episode comes from a conversation I had on a recent team day. I was working with a group of leaders, and one of the leaders said to me, but what about if your team don't want praise? What about if your team don't need praise? What about if they've told you that actually they just don't need it? Do I do it? Do I not do it? Is it true? And this episode is about the importance of praise, what it feels like when we don't get it, the reasons why we do need it, and why I don't agree with that comment. Hello and welcome to the podcast, You're Better Than That, hosted by me, Hannah Miller, and joined by my friend Zoe Rosswaddell.
Hello, Hannah.
Hi. I am sadly in my woolly autumn jumper, which is my favourite jumper, but I nearly didn't wear it this morning because I thought, am I ready to transition? Am I ready to transition to start wearing it? But it is just cold and wet and I have to. So apart from my jumper, we thought we'd talk about praise today. We thought we'd talk about, do people really need it? Is it an overblown idea? Is it something that actually some of us need, some of us don't? If you've got people around you who are saying, don't praise me, don't give me praise, what do we do about that? How do you feel about praise? How do the people listening to us feel about the concept of praise? And we thought we'd talk about the giving of praise today.
Yes.
I'll praise you. Zoe, I would just like to say publicly, I could say lots of things like about your beautiful jumper and your beautiful smile, but also thank you for how you have worked so hard on our Purpose Pursuit launch. We have just closed the doors, haven't we?
Yes.
You have made things feel so unstressed. So thank you for your calmness. But we've just closed the doors, and that's exciting.
We've got multiple different countries
We
represented.
have. We've got people doing the course, as well as in the UK, all the different, nations of the UK. I know this is part of the UK, but we've got Guernsey, we've got the Shetland Isles, we've got a few people in different states of America.
Yes.
Spain, New Zealand,
Yeah.
and Africa.
Yeah.
I mean, Africa's a continent, Gambia. So, yeah, exciting. Really exciting.
That is very
We
exciting.
digress, but it is very exciting. And now the doors are closed and we'll be working with those individuals for the next few weeks. And I'm sure we'll keep people posted on that. But let's talk about praise. What do you think about praise? Do we need it? Do we not need it? What's your thoughts about this, giving praise?
I think you don't lose anything by giving praise.
No.
The culture you've set in this team is very much give praise, which I love. It's very positive. And I just don't think you lose anything by encouraging someone or...
No.
Yeah, what do you think?
I definitely think we are designed to receive feedback. We are designed to be told. And if you just think about children who've never received praise, so people who grow up in homes where it's an absolute absence of any praise, that affects the way that child sees themselves in the world. And if you could also argue a child that's never received feedback on improvement or criticism or areas of growth, that affects how they see the world. So this conversation isn't about removing criticism or not giving people development feedback, but it's about recognizing that actually most people are in a deficit. Most people, not everyone, but lots of people are in a deficit, and the evidence is there, like data is there to say that we do better when we are coming from like a bedrock of praise. So there's a Gallup book which is called How Full Is Your Bucket? And the concept of the book about buckets is that you can be a dipper or a filler. So you can take from someone's bucket. So the concept of the book is that we've all got buckets on our head, essentially. Well, we haven't, but imagining that. And every interaction I have with you has the potential to add to your bucket positively or to dip and to take from it. And to kind of consider this interaction and transaction we're having. And when people's buckets are full, it's not only just good for well-being, they're going to do better, like in terms of performance, productivity, retention, how they feel about coming to work. I think the problem we've got is that people associate sometimes, particularly those who say, I don't need praise, with this idea of being gushed over. public gushing is not the same as giving someone praise.
And specific intentional praise as well.
Totally.
Like just sending a text message or something like that.
That is really important. And I think that's one of my main things I'd want to say today about the giving of praise is that it's about being specific and intentional. Actually, non-specific gushing can be detrimental. And I actually remember working with a team once that had quite a positive environment. And one of the team members, in fact, more than one, when I was doing one-to-ones with them, said, we know we're amazing. We're told we're amazing, but we don't know why. And that's a really interesting piece of feedback, that actually gushing doesn't feel sincere. The withholding of praise helps people feel a bit unsure and insecure. But the place in between there of specific, helpful, intentional feedback, human to human, not because we've got some sort of routine process rhythm or whatever that means we have to tick a box, makes us feel seen and heard and recognised.
Yeah. How have you set that culture in your family? Because I think you can think about it in the context of work, which is important, but how have you done it in your family?
Well, if you ask my children, they would probably say I don't do it enough, honestly, on a bad day. On a good day, they might represent me differently, but I think it is, for me, with my children, it is very much about spotting when you see those natural talents, gifts, personality traits in action and saying, look at what you did in that. That was so, that was so you. Like, for example, if one of my children, like Levi, is so inclusive and just so good at making people feel included, that when I see him doing that, it's about me calling that out, because when somebody shows you that or reminds you of that trait, you feel more confident to use it next time. I think it's also about trying not to, one of the things that I think is important as a parent and really important, excuse me, in the workplace, is it's not just about outcome praise. And in fact, that's the most unhelpful. I've been really careful not to use clever boy as much as I possibly can. I mean, I probably did when they were learning to use the potty. You're such a clever boy. And I think that was okay. But having been somebody who performed at school, the challenge with being told you're clever is when you find something difficult, you then think, well, this is no longer true about me. So if we can praise traits and some of the effort that we see, I think that helps us shift from then feeling quite discombobulated when suddenly we find something hard. So it's great when we meet targets, but if we do meet targets, I think if we can talk about why did that happen? Yeah. So I think going back to your point about in the home, it's trying to catch out those moments and verbalize them. Honestly, it's so much easier to spot the things that need improvement. Like if you think about your home life where we're very free to be ourselves, we can just recreate that in the workplace and see all the things that could be better. And so actually we have to push against that groove and go the other way. And going the other way isn't about saying something's good when it's not good, but it's about spotting the things. One of the things that sometimes people say to me is, well, what about if the person isn't there yet? So let's say it's in the workplace and somebody isn't where you want them to be. How do you praise them? And I guess my thoughts on that is to think about development praise and what's better than it was before. So if there's somebody who's on a bit of a trajectory and actually they're not where you want them to be in terms of performance, what can you see in effort, improvement, steps towards there that you can praise so that they get there? Because if they constantly feel like they're not getting there, you've either got a decision to make that this person's wrong seat, they're in the wrong position, or you've got to help get them there by incrementally praising them. I think lots of people grow up with a missing piece here, or they haven't had praise well demonstrated, even in homes where your parents have been for you. I'm not talking about being in really difficult situations. We don't necessarily do praise brilliantly. And so I think it's something we have to exercise and practice to find this place where it's specific and meaningful and not gushing and not absent.
Why do you think, like, what's the point? Why do you think this is an important
Yeah.
conversation to have?
So I think for me, it's important because if I guess the image that's coming to my mind is that if you're somebody listening and you think, I don't really get praise, people don't really use their words or write things to me or use any kind of communication to praise me, it's like looking at a plant that's going to wither. You're not going to meet your full potential without it. Well, you might, but I think you'd do it from quite, if I just want to pause and reflect on that, I think you'd do it from quite a broken place. So, have you seen the film Whiplash?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so let's just use this as an example, because the question that Whiplash tries to answer is, does the end justify the means? Excuse me. Whiplash is a film about a young man who is a brilliant drummer. And he's a young man and he gets to learn the drums at an elite American college. And he wants to be first seat drummer. The mentality of the conductor is brutal. He never praises. He is aggressive. He's not just absent, he is the opposite. He squeezes the light. So in one of the scenes, his hands are bleeding from playing the drums. It's a very difficult watch. It's about the role that people can play in our life who are in power and are able to push and push us. He never feels good enough. And actually, I don't want to spoil the film, but you could argue that he did improve under that regime. But at what cost did he improve? And I can think of people who I love really dearly who have experienced and grown up in environments where they grew up under not that bad, but regimes that were like that. And probably they did achieve. So I think you could achieve without it, but it comes then from this real place of insecurity. And at any moment, this can be taken from me because this is this hard taskmaster. So I think the evidence is that if we can get like the space right between just gushy, wishy-washy stuff where there's no critique and critical, never ever praise, and we can find that space in between, that's when like that idea of flourishing is going to take place. And actually the evidence is such that people perform better. You know, it's one of the questions that Gallup use in their engagement survey. I have received praise or recognition for doing good work in the last 7 days. And the reason it's every 7 days is because that's what the data tells us. I just read you a stat, didn't I, before we started, that managers and leaders who create environments where this is missing, they have the potential to increase your chance of having a stroke by 33%. So that's the reason why this stuff matters. Do we want to use an approach which is, well, the end justifies the means? We smash all our targets? Or is there a kinder way of doing it?
And I love in one of your modules in the Purpose Pursuit, you actually have people go away and get praise from family,
yeah, they don't know yet they've
friends.
got to do that.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, no, it's fine. No, you can tell them.
But I love that because it actually shows that in order for us to walk in our unique purpose, we actually need encouragement.
Yeah.
We actually need people to, not for the sake of puffing ourselves up, but like what you've said, it's part of human growth and allowing us to flourish.
And I wonder, I think going back to the very original thing that we talked about here, when I gave the example from the story, my thing that keeps going around my head is, why do people think they don't need praise? Why do some people think that? I do think there's a spectrum. Like, I think some people need more praise and or feedback than others. Laura likes development feedback because she's weird, and she would like me to give her development feedback every day. But we're on a spectrum of how much we need, and there's definitely some people that thrive more on external recognition than others. Other people are perhaps more intrinsically motivated. But I thought about this group of people and thought, can it be true? Or could it be that they just haven't received it in a way that's helpful yet? Could it be that what they don't want is public praise? Not everybody likes that. You know, I've died inside sometimes when people have made a big old gush. I mean, it's quite nice in some way, but the other part of me is like, oh gosh, don't do it like this. I feel really embarrassed. And maybe what they're thinking is a type of praise they don't want to receive. And so if you are a leader or a colleague, I think a really good thing to do is to find out how people like it. What kind of... Do they want it written? Do they want it one-to-one? Would they want it in front of their colleagues? You know, what kind of format works for recognition and praise? Don't assume everyone's the same. And I do think I just want to come back to that point around being as specific as possible. That's why I love working with organisations that use their strengths, because you can talk about them. So I can be like, well, your adaptability, though, is one of the reasons you've been so calm, and the fact that you're able to roll with the pivots and the changes has helped bring that calmness. And so it helps those of us who find it harder to come up with praise. It gives you a whole language to go, oh, that's why they're good at that.
Yeah. What about for someone who's maybe thinking about this in a work context, who desires that, but the culture is not one that encourages praise or feedback in a positive way?
So I've got some clients where it's really built into their culture. So on one side, I remember one client I've got, and every day somebody's given some specific praise in their little team huddles, just in like groups of 6 or 7, somebody will be praised, and they do that every day. It's just part of their rhythm. And when people start, they can find it a bit awkward. And what they say is they'll say, that's just how we do things around here, you'll get used to it. And I love that. I love that they say that. They don't make a big song and dance. They're like, this is just what we do. You'll get used to it, and get used to it, because this is the culture we're developing. And then I've got other clients who perhaps work in large organisations, probably things like the NHS actually, and other behemoths where culture is much harder to shift. And they'll say, nobody's doing it around me. Everyone's too busy. It just doesn't happen. My advice to them is to start to do it. So if it's so cheesy, but it's about how do you, with that little group of people around you, even if you are not the leader, you're just a member of that team, how do you just begin to say, once a day I'm going to say something to someone, and start to push in the other direction? So if you're that person who's listening and you think, nobody does this around me, find a way that authentically feels like you can do that, and begin to make that change. And I recognise that there are some people listening that will think, nobody's ever praised me at work. I might have got a thank you. And by the way, thank you is not praise. That's courtesy.
Yeah.
It's not praise. It's just a case of saying thank you for what you did. You know, if you wanted to say thank you and make it praise, say thank you for da-da-da, and then add a sentence to it. I really also think we don't need to make this complicated or long-winded. It's just about adding a bit of specificity to it. Why was it really good? You know, some of the client, from my own perspective, the texts I've received after a workshop or from when I've done a speaking engagement where it just had a line in it that said the why me, as in why was it a good speaking engagement? Why was it a good workshop? They're the ones that really make a difference. I know that I'm okay at doing it. Like, I've had years of feedback and scoring I go through. I have to be scored for the work I do, don't I, Zoe? With one of my clients, I'm scored out of 5 anonymously by everyone who attends. And if your scores don't stay high enough, then you're kicked off the scheme. So I know that my scores are good enough. But when someone says, we loved it because, well, I can repeat that. Yeah. We loved it because we thought you were down to earth, or we loved it because you told stories. We loved it because you gave us personal insights. So those are things that I'm confident I've had in praise. But there could be other ways it's really good that nobody ever says, you know, that there are other ways things can be good. So I think acknowledging the individual and thinking about what exactly they did, just shifting it slightly makes a massive, massive difference, and they're more likely to repeat it. Another thing I just want to mention is, this is really interesting. Gallup have a book called It's the Manager. And one of the things that they essentially discovered, and which is why so many organisations fall down, is that they don't realise how important that immediate manager is to the team's happiness and well-being and performance and productivity. And so your CEO might do like a praise, which is really nice to receive, or a colleague might give you praise, but your direct manager has the most impact. And the problem with larger organisations is you'll get some good ones and you'll get some not so good ones. So if you're listening to this and you have any position of responsibility, as much as you can invest in your management, like at every level, so that they do this, the better. There's no point you being good at it and nobody else. So if you are listening and you're a manager, you have so much potential to speak into the lives of those people that you're leading. You are really important, really, really important. As much as they might like an edict from on high, actually you make a difference to their productivity. Couple quick things to say, because I'm aware of time. Be specific. Try and think about this 5-to-1 model. That's a good ratio. We need to hear about 5 positive bucket-filling things to everyone. If that ratio gets off, it becomes demotivating. However, if it's above 13-to-1, the opposite happens. So if you're in an environment where everything's amazing and nothing is criticised, that's also not going to work. So we've got to find that sweet spot. Get specific. Ask people how they want it. Ask them whether they want it to be written, one-to-one, in a team meeting. What's going to be most beneficial to them? So ask them and find out how. If you work somewhere where it doesn't happen, do it anyway. If you feel a massive gap in your own life, be brave and ask somebody for some feedback about what it is that you do specifically that they appreciate. And if you feel a little bit lost in this, again, I'm going to come back to strengths. If you've never taken your strengths assessment, you are going to receive some praise through the form of that report, because it is looking at you through the lens of this is what you do best, this is what you contribute. And one last thing I want to say is there's something about the reciprocity of this that takes place and why it matters. When we give praise, and I'm not talking about flattery, when we give praise, when we give feedback, there is a reciprocity, a transaction that takes place where actually it comes back good for us. Not necessarily that they're going to praise us back, but that reciprocity of being willing to do tasks, being willing to be productive takes place. Whether that person realises it does or not, psychological study after psychological study has shown the impact of praise on people's kind of willingness to do things afterwards. We don't want to be false or flatter people. We want to be real and honest. And if you are struggling to find anything to praise in somebody else, we need to have a good old think. What's going on there? Is that about them? Is that about you? What's the issue there? And the final thing to say is if you feel that you don't need praise, have a little think about why you think you don't.